As he waited for his meal, Robert's attention was drawn to a young girl sitting alone in a booth across the restaurant. She appeared to be in her mid-teens, African American, with her hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. What struck him wasn't her appearance, but her behavior. She was carefully counting money on the table, her movements deliberate and focused. The sight transported Robert back to his own childhood, to countless nights when he'd watched his mother perform the same ritual, desperately trying to make their limited funds stretch until the next paycheck. The girl was studying from textbooks that looked worn and used, their covers bent and pages marked with years of previous owners. She worked diligently, occasionally glancing up at the menu board with a look Robert recognized all too well, the expression of someone calculating not just what they wanted, but what they could afford. When Betty brought the girl her meal, Robert watched as she took a photograph of it with her phone before eating. The gesture puzzled him until he realized she wasn't doing it for social media, but as a way to remember the moment. It was the behavior of someone for whom a restaurant meal was a rare luxury, not a casual occurrence. Robert found himself studying the girl more closely. Despite her obvious financial struggles, there was something remarkable about her composure. She didn't look defeated or angry. Instead, she carried herself with quiet dignity, focusing intently on her homework between bites of her burger. Her textbooks appeared to be for advanced classes: chemistry, calculus, literature. This wasn't a student just getting by. This was someone who excelled despite her circumstances. The observation stirred something deep within Robert's chest. He'd been that kid once, the one who did homework in diners and fast food restaurants because there wasn't a quiet place to study at home. He'd been the one counting quarters and choosing between school supplies and lunch money. The memories came flooding back with startling clarity. Robert remembered being 12 years old, sitting in his grandmother's diner after school, trying to do algebra homework while the dinner rush swirled around him. His grandmother, Louise, would slip him free meals when his mother was working late, always pretending it was leftover food that would go to waste anyway. She'd been his first example of how successful people should use their resources to help others. As his own meal arrived, Robert continued to observe the girl discreetly. He noticed how she made her food last, taking small bites and pausing frequently to work on her studies. When Betty checked on her, the interaction was warm and respectful on both sides. The girl was polite, grateful, and clearly well-raised despite whatever difficulties she was facing. Robert had built his fortune not just through business acumen, but through his ability to recognize potential in others. His company's success came largely from his talent for identifying brilliant people who others had overlooked, often because they came from unconventional backgrounds. Some of his best employees had been homeless, former convicts, or college dropouts who possessed raw intelligence and determination that traditional hiring processes missed. Looking at this young woman, Robert saw the same qualities that had made his best hires so successful. There was an intensity in how she approached her studies, a methodical way she managed her limited resources, and most importantly, a resilience that couldn't be taught or faked. These were the characteristics of someone who would succeed if given the opportunity. Robert's phone buzzed with a text from his assistant reminding him about an early morning flight back to Cincinnati. He glanced at the message, then back at the girl. She was packing up her textbooks now, carefully placing them in a worn backpack. The sight of her preparing to leave triggered an unexpected sense of urgency in Robert. Throughout his career, Robert had donated millions to various charities and causes. His foundation focused on education, particularly providing scholarships for underprivileged students. But those donations felt abstract, removed from the actual people they were meant to help. This was different. This was real, immediate, and sitting just 20 feet away from him. Robert had always believed that the universe presented opportunities when you were ready to see them. His grandmother Louise used to say that luck was just preparation meeting opportunity, and that successful people were the ones who recognized those moments when they appeared. As he watched the girl gather her things, Robert felt with absolute certainty that this was one of those moments. The girl stood up, leaving a small tip on the table despite clearly having very little money. The gesture spoke volumes about her character. She was someone who understood that other people depended on tips for their livelihood, even when she was struggling herself. It was exactly the kind of thoughtfulness that Robert valued most in people. As she walked toward the exit, Robert made a decision that would change both their lives forever. Maya had just reached the door when she heard Betty's voice calling her name. She turned back to see the older woman walking toward her with an expression of gentle concern. "Maya, honey, can you come back for just a minute?" Betty asked, her voice soft but insistent. Confused but trusting, Maya followed Betty back toward the dining area. She noticed that most of the dinner crowd had cleared out, leaving only a few scattered customers finishing their meals. The restaurant felt quieter now, more intimate, and Maya wondered if she'd forgotten something at her table. Betty led her toward the corner where a well-dressed man in his late 50s sat alone with his laptop and the remains of a meatloaf dinner. He looked up as they approached, and Maya was struck by his kind eyes and the way he seemed to really see her, not just look through her like most adults did. "Maya," Betty said, "this is Mr. Harrison. He was wondering if he could have a word with you." Maya felt a flutter of anxiety in her stomach. Had she done something wrong? Was this man some kind of social worker or police officer? Her mind raced through possibilities, none of them good. In her experience, when adults wanted to talk to her, it usually meant more problems, more complications in an already difficult life. Robert stood up and extended his hand with a warm smile. "Please, call me Robert. And don't worry, you're not in any trouble. I just noticed you studying so hard over there, and I was curious about what you're working on." Maya shook his hand cautiously, noting the firm but gentle grip. Up close, she could see that his clothes were expensive but not flashy, and he wore a simple watch that probably cost more than she made in a year. But his demeanor was approachable. Nothing like the intimidating authority figures she'd encountered in the foster care system. "Chemistry and calculus," Maya replied honestly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have tests tomorrow." Robert's eyebrows raised with genuine interest. "Those are challenging subjects. What grade are you in?" "I'm a senior," Maya said, still uncertain about where this conversation was heading. "I graduate in December." "That's wonderful," Robert said, and Maya could tell he meant it. "Betty, would it be okay if Maya and I sat down for a few minutes? I promise this is completely innocent. I just have some questions about her studies." Betty nodded knowingly. In her 20-plus years of waitressing, she'd developed a sixth sense about people, and something told her this conversation was going to be important for Maya. "I'll bring you both some coffee," she said, already heading toward the kitchen. Maya slid into the booth across from Robert, her backpack clutched protectively in her lap. She'd learned to be wary of adults who showed unexpected interest in her life. But something about Robert felt different. Maybe it was the way he'd asked permission to sit down, or how he'd introduced himself as just Robert instead of demanding respect based on his obvious wealth. "I hope you don't mind me asking," Robert began, "but I couldn't help noticing how focused you were on your homework. It's not often you see a high school student tackling advanced subjects with that level of intensity." Maya relaxed slightly. Talking about school was safe territory. "I like learning," she said simply, "and I need good grades to get into college." "What do you want to study in college?" Robert asked, leaning forward with genuine curiosity. "Nursing," Maya replied without hesitation. "I want to help people, and nurses make a good living. It's practical." Robert nodded thoughtfully. Maya's answer revealed so much about her character and circumstances. She'd chosen a career that balanced her desire to help others with the practical need for financial stability. It was the kind of mature, well-reasoned decision that most teenagers never had to make. "Have you applied to colleges yet?" he asked. Maya's expression grew more guarded. "I got accepted to the community college nursing program," she said carefully. "It starts in the spring." Robert picked up on her hesitation immediately. "But?" he prompted gently. Maya looked down at her hands, which were folded tightly in her lap. This was the part she didn't like talking about, the part that made her feel ashamed even though she knew it wasn't her fault. "Tuition is $3,000, she said quietly. plus books and supplies, and I'd have to quit my job to go to school full-time. The pieces of Maya's story were falling into place for Robert. The careful money counting, the worn textbooks, the way she'd made her inexpensive meal last as long as possible. This was a young woman who was trying to pull herself up by her bootstraps, but the bootstraps kept breaking. "Do you live with your parents?" Robert asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Maya shook her head. "They died when I was 10. Car accident. I've been in foster care, but I aged out 6 months ago. Now I live at the Sunset Motel and work at Peterson's Grocery." The matter-of-fact way she delivered this information broke Robert's heart. Maya spoke about her tragic circumstances the way most people discuss the weather, as simple facts of life that couldn't be changed. There was no self-pity in her voice, no anger or bitterness, just acceptance of a reality that no 15-year-old should have to face alone. Betty appeared with 2 steaming cups of coffee, giving Robert a meaningful look as she set them down. She'd overheard enough of the conversation to understand what was happening, and her expression encouraged him to continue. "Maya," Robert said carefully, "can I ask you something that might sound strange?" Maya nodded, wrapping her hands around the warm coffee cup. "If you could say anything to someone who had the power to help you achieve your dreams, what would it be? What would you want them to know?" Maya looked up at Robert with those tired but hopeful eyes that had been haunting him since he'd first noticed her. She seemed to understand that this wasn't a hypothetical question, that somehow this moment mattered more than she could fully comprehend. She took a deep breath, gathering courage from somewhere deep inside her 15-year-old heart. The words that came out were simple, honest, and devastating in their directness. "Sir, I need help." 4 words. That's all it took to change everything. Robert felt the words hit him like a physical blow. In his decades of business dealings, he'd heard countless pitches, elaborate presentations designed to separate him from his money. But he'd never heard anything as powerful as those 4 simple words delivered with such quiet dignity. Maya wasn't asking for pity or trying to manipulate him with a sob story. She was simply stating a fact. She needed help, and she was brave enough to ask for it. In a world where most people were too proud to admit they needed assistance, Maya's honesty was both refreshing and heartbreaking. Robert set down his coffee cup, his mind already racing with possibilities. "Maya," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. "What if I told you that help was sitting right here at this table?" Maya blinked, not quite understanding what he meant. "I don't follow," she said softly. Robert pulled out his phone and speed-dialed his assistant's number. It was after business hours, but Linda had been with him for over a decade and was used to his unconventional requests. She answered on the second ring. "Linda, it's Robert. I need you to handle something tonight, regardless of the hour." He looked directly at Maya as he spoke. "I'm going to give you the name of a young woman. I need you to contact the registrar's office at the local community college first thing tomorrow morning and pay her tuition in full for their nursing program. Then I want you to set up a monthly stipend account for her living expenses, books, and anything else she needs to succeed." Maya's eyes grew wide with disbelief. She started to speak, but Robert held up a gentle hand. "The amount?" Robert continued, into the phone. "Let's start with $25,000. That should cover everything for the 2-year program with room to spare." He paused, listening to Linda's questions. "Yes, I'm serious. And Linda? This doesn't go through the foundation. This is personal." Robert ended the call and looked at Maya, who was staring at him with tears streaming down her face. She seemed frozen, unable to process what had just happened. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why would you do this? You don't even know me." Robert leaned back in his booth, remembering a conversation he'd had with his grandmother Louise many years ago. She'd been dying of cancer, and he'd asked her what the secret was to a life well lived. Her answer had stayed with him ever since. "The secret, Bobby, is recognizing when God puts someone in your path who needs what you have to give. Most people miss those moments because they're too busy looking for something else." "Maya," Robert said gently, "I grew up in a situation very similar to yours. My father left when I was 7, and my mother worked 2 jobs just to keep us afloat. I spent countless hours doing homework in my grandmother's diner, watching her struggle to make ends meet. He pointed to the booth where Maya had been sitting earlier. When I saw you over there tonight, carefully counting your money and studying so intently, it was like looking back in time. I saw myself at your age, and I remembered how desperately I needed someone to believe in me. Maya wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. But $25,000, and that's more money than I've ever even imagined having. Robert smiled. To you, it's life-changing. To me, it's less than I spent on my car. But here's the thing, Maya. This isn't charity. This is an investment. I'm investing in you because I can see your potential and I believe you're going to do amazing things with this opportunity. I don't know what to say, Maya said, her voice thick with emotion. You don't have to say anything right now, Robert replied. But I do have one condition. Maya's expression grew serious. She'd learned that everything came with conditions, especially help from strangers. I want you to promise me that when you're successful, not if when, you'll remember this moment. And someday, when you meet someone who needs what you have to give, you'll pay it forward. Maya nodded emphatically. I promise. I swear. I promise. Robert pulled out a business card and wrote his personal cell phone number on the back. I want you to call me if you need anything else. And I mean anything. If you need help finding an apartment, if you're struggling with classes, if you just need someone to talk to. You're not alone anymore, Maya. Betty appeared at their table with a slice of chocolate cake. On the house, she said, with a knowing smile. I think this calls for a celebration. As Maya took her first bite of the cake, she looked across the table at Robert with an expression of pure gratitude. Thank you, she said simply, for seeing me, for believing in me, for changing my life. Robert felt tears prick his own eyes. Thank you, Maya, for having the courage to ask for help, for showing me what's really important. You've changed my life too. Outside, the evening had grown dark, but inside Henderson's diner, the future had never looked brighter for a 15-year-old girl who'd learned that sometimes 4 simple words were all it took to change everything. 6 months later, Maya stood in the hallway of Riverside Community College, checking her schedule for the 3rd time. Spring semester had been a whirlwind of anatomy classes, medical terminology, and hands-on clinical training. The girl who'd once struggled to afford a single meal now had a meal plan, a safe apartment just off campus, and a backpack full of brand-new textbooks. The transformation hadn't been just financial. For the first time in her life, Maya had stability. She woke up each morning in her own bed, in her own room, without wondering where her next meal would come from, or whether she'd have a place to sleep that night. The constant anxiety that had been her companion for years had slowly faded, replaced by something she'd almost forgotten existed. Hope. Her apartment was small but perfect for her needs. Robert had helped her find it through a property management company he'd worked with before. It was in a safe neighborhood, walking distance from campus, with a bus route that connected to the hospital where she'd eventually do her clinical rotations. Maya had decorated it simply with items from thrift stores and discount shops, but to her it felt like a palace. The first few weeks of school had been overwhelming. Maya discovered that being academically smart and being prepared for college were 2 different things. She'd never learned how to take notes effectively, how to study for comprehensive exams, or how to manage her time when faced with multiple assignments. But her professors quickly recognized her determination, and several had taken extra time to help her develop the study skills she needed. Dr. Patricia Williams, her anatomy and physiology professor, had become an unofficial mentor. During office hours one afternoon, Maya had broken down crying, convinced she was going to fail her first major exam. Dr. Williams had sat with her for 2 hours, not just helping her understand the material, but teaching her how to organize her notes and create study schedules. Maya, Dr. Williams had said that day, intelligence isn't just about how quickly you learn new information. It's about how you adapt when things get difficult. You've been adapting to difficult situations your entire life. College is just a different kind of challenge. Those words had stuck with Maya through every difficult moment since. When she struggled with medical terminology, she created flashcards and carried them everywhere. When she found pharmacology confusing, she formed a study group with classmates and met in the library every Tuesday evening. When she felt overwhelmed by the volume of reading required, she adjusted her schedule to wake up an hour earlier each day for additional study time. Maya's relationship with Robert had evolved into something neither of them had expected. What had started as a generous gesture had become a genuine friendship. Robert Kelly. "You know," Robert had told her during one of their calls, "I've been thinking about our conversation at Henderson's. You said you needed help, but I think I needed help too. I just didn't realize it at the time." "What do you mean?" Maya had asked. "I'd been so focused on making money and growing my business that I'd forgotten why I started the company in the first place. My grandmother always told me that success without purpose is just expensive emptiness. Helping you reminded me what my purpose was supposed to be." That conversation had led to Robert restructuring his charitable foundation. Instead of just writing checks to organizations, he'd started a scholarship program that provided direct support to students like Maya. The program didn't just cover tuition. It provided mentorship, life skills training, and ongoing support throughout college and into early career development. Maya had become the unofficial poster child for the program, though she was always careful to protect her privacy. Robert sometimes asked her to speak with potential donors or other scholarship recipients, and Maya discovered she had a gift for connecting with people who'd faced similar struggles. During one such event, a young man named David approached her afterward. He was 19, had aged out of foster care 2 years earlier, and was working 3 part-time jobs while trying to attend community college classes in the evening. "I heard what you said about asking for help," David had said. "I've been too proud to ask, but I'm drowning. How did you know it was okay to ask?" Maya had looked at this young man and seen herself 8 months earlier. "I didn't know it was okay," she'd admitted. "I was just desperate enough to try. But here's what I learned. The worst thing that can happen when you ask for help is that someone says no. And you're already living with no every day. You might as well see if someone wants to say yes." David had become the second recipient of Robert's scholarship program. As Maya walked toward her final exam of the semester, she reflected on how much her life had changed. Her grades were solid. Not perfect, but strong enough to ensure she'd continue in the program. More importantly, she'd found her calling. Working with patients during her clinical rotations had confirmed that nursing was exactly where she belonged. There had been challenges beyond academics. Maya had struggled with imposter syndrome, feeling like she didn't belong among classmates who'd grown up in stable, middle-class families. She'd had to learn basic social skills that most people took for granted, like how to network at professional events or how to interact with professors during office hours. The financial security had also been an adjustment. For months, Maya had continued to live as if she might run out of money at any moment. She'd saved every penny of her monthly stipend beyond basic necessities, afraid to spend money on anything that wasn't absolutely essential. It had taken several conversations with Robert and a session with a counselor at the college's wellness center to help her understand that she was allowed to buy herself nice things occasionally, that treating herself to dinner out or a new outfit wasn't being irresponsible. Maya's phone buzzed with a text from Robert. "Good luck on your final exam today. I know you're going to do great. Proud of you." She smiled and typed back, "Thank you for everything. I couldn't have done this without you." His response came quickly. "You would have found a way. I just helped you find it a little faster." As Maya entered the classroom for her exam, she thought about that response. Robert was probably right. She'd been fighting for her future long before she met him. The determination, the resilience, the intelligence, those had all been inside her already. Robert's gift hadn't been just the money. It had been showing her that she was worth investing in, that her dreams were valid and achievable. The exam went well. Maya finished with 15 minutes to spare and felt confident about her answers. As she walked out of the building, she realized she had something she'd never experienced before, a clear path forward. Next semester would bring more advanced courses, clinical rotations at the regional hospital, and eventually graduation with her nursing degree. But more than that, Maya had a future. She had a career she was passionate about, financial stability, and most importantly, the knowledge that she was capable of overcoming whatever challenges life might throw at her. That evening, Maya drove to Henderson's diner for dinner. Betty was still working, though she'd mentioned she was planning to retire soon. When Maya walked in, Betty's face lit up with a grandmother's pride. "Look at you," Betty said, pulling Maya into a warm hug. "College girl, I'm so proud of you, honey." Maya requested the same corner booth where she'd sat that night 6 months ago. As she waited for her food, she pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found David's number. "Hey," she texted, "want to grab coffee sometime this week? I have an idea for a project we could work on together." Maya had been thinking about starting a support group for students who'd aged out of foster care. She'd learned that there were dozens of them at the college, all struggling with similar challenges but trying to handle them alone. If her experience had taught her anything, it was that asking for help wasn't a sign of weakness, it was a sign of wisdom. As Betty brought her dinner, a burger and fries just like that first night, Maya took out her phone and snapped a picture. This time, though, it wasn't to remember a rare treat. It was to remember how far she'd come, and to remind herself that every ending was also a beginning. Tomorrow, she'd start planning her support group. Next month, she'd begin her advanced clinical rotations. Next year, she'd graduate and start her career as a nurse. And someday, when she met someone who needed what she had to give, she'd remember 4 simple words that had changed her life. "Sir, I need help." But now, she also knew 4 words that were equally important. "How can I help?" 2 years later, Maya stood at the podium in the college's main auditorium, looking out at an audience of family members, faculty, and fellow graduates. She was wearing a cap and gown, but more importantly, she was wearing a nursing pin that represented 2 years of grueling study, countless hours of clinical practice, and the fulfillment of a dream that had once seemed impossible. As the valedictorian of her nursing class, Maya had been chosen to give the commencement address. She'd written and rewritten her speech dozens of times, wanting to find the perfect words to capture what this moment meant to her and to the other students who'd overcome incredible odds to reach this day. "When I started this program," Maya began, her voice clear and confident, "I thought education was about learning facts and procedures. I thought success meant memorizing textbook chapters and passing exams, but I discovered that real education is about learning to see possibilities where others see obstacles. And real success is about lifting others up as you climb." In the audience, Robert sat in the front row, tears already forming in his eyes. Next to him sat Betty, now retired from Henderson's diner, who'd become like a grandmother to Maya. Behind them were David and 12 other scholarship recipients from Robert's program, all at various stages of their own educational journeys. 2 years ago, Maya continued, I was a 15-year-old girl who thought she had to face the world alone. I'd learned to be self-reliant because I had no choice. But I hadn't learned the most important lesson of all, that asking for help isn't a sign of weakness, it's a sign of courage. And that helping others isn't just charity, it's an investment in the kind of world we want to live in. Maya had graduated summa cum laude with a 3.97 GPA. More importantly, she'd already accepted a position in the pediatric ward at Cincinnati Children's Hospital, where she'd specialize in caring for children in foster care and those from difficult family situations. Her starting salary was more money than she'd ever imagined earning, but Maya had already decided to live modestly and invest the majority of her income in her own scholarship fund. During her final semester, Maya had established the 4 Words Foundation, with seed money from her own savings and a matching grant from Robert's company. The foundation provided not just financial assistance to students aging out of foster care, but also mentorship, life skills training, and ongoing emotional support. Maya had learned that money alone wasn't enough. Young people needed someone to believe in them, to guide them through the challenges of independence, and to remind them that their past didn't determine their future. My nursing professors taught me that the most important tool in medicine isn't a stethoscope or a syringe, Maya said, her voice growing stronger. It's the ability to see each patient as a whole person, not just a collection of symptoms. That same principle applies to life. We all have the power to see potential in people that others might overlook, to recognize that everyone has value regardless of their circumstances. The support group Maya had started in her first year had grown into a campus-wide program. Over 50 students now attended weekly meetings, where they shared resources, studied together, and provided emotional support for each other. The group had expanded beyond foster care alumni to include anyone who'd faced significant challenges in pursuing their education. Maya had learned that struggle created a bond between people that transcended differences in race, age, or background. One of Maya's proudest moments had come 6 months earlier, when David graduated with his associate degree in computer programming. Robert's company had immediately hired him as a junior developer, and David was already working on software applications designed to help social service agencies better track and support foster children. The boy who'd once been too proud to ask for help was now creating systems to help others get the assistance they needed. As I look out at my fellow graduates today, Maya continued, I see doctors who will heal, teachers who will inspire, engineers who will build, and artists who will create beauty in the world. But most importantly, I see people who understand that success isn't just about what you achieve for yourself, it's about what you make possible for others. Maya's clinical rotations had confirmed her calling in ways she'd never expected. Working with sick children had been emotionally challenging, but it had also been deeply rewarding. She'd discovered that her own experiences with loss and struggle had given her an unusual ability to connect with young patients who were facing their own difficulties. One patient in particular had touched Maya's heart. 8-year-old Casey had been in foster care for 3 years, bouncing between homes while receiving treatment for a chronic illness. The little girl was angry, scared, and resistant to the medical staff's attempts to help her. But something about Maya's approach had broken through Casey's defenses. You know what it's like, Casey had said during one of their conversations, to not have anyone who really cares about you. Maya had sat on the edge of Casey's hospital bed and told her story. Not all of it, but enough for Casey to understand that Maya truly did know what it felt like to be alone and afraid. That conversation had marked the beginning of Casey's recovery, both physically and emotionally. Someone once told me, Maya said, approaching the end of her speech, that the universe presents opportunities when we're ready to see them. Today, we're all leaving here with the tools and knowledge to recognize those opportunities, not just for ourselves but for the people whose paths will cross ours. In the weeks following graduation, Maya would start her new job at the hospital. She'd also begin working on her bachelor's degree through an online program, with the eventual goal of becoming a nurse practitioner. Robert had offered to fund her continued education, but Maya had politely declined, choosing instead to pay her own way with her nursing salary. She learned that there was value in earning something yourself, in knowing that your success came from your own efforts. Maya would also be moving out of her small apartment into a larger place where she could provide temporary housing for young people aging out of foster care. She'd learned that the most critical time for foster youth was the first few months after leaving the system, when they were most likely to become homeless or make poor decisions out of desperation. Before I close, Maya said, looking directly at Robert, I want to thank someone who taught me that generosity isn't just about giving money. It's about giving someone the chance to discover their own potential. Thank you, Robert, for seeing something in me that I didn't yet see in myself. Robert wiped away tears as the audience erupted in applause. He thought about his grandmother, Louise, who'd passed away 15 years earlier, and how proud she would have been to see this moment. He thought about the scared, determined girl he'd met in Henderson's diner and marveled at the confident, young woman she'd become. But most importantly, Maya concluded, her voice filled with emotion, I want to thank everyone who's ever asked for help when they needed it, and everyone who's ever said yes when someone asked. Those 4 words, "Sir, I need help," changed my life. But they were only powerful because someone was willing to listen and respond with 4 words of their own. How can I help? As Maya stepped down from the podium, she was surrounded by classmates, professors, and family members offering congratulations. But her eyes sought out the people who'd become her chosen family: Robert, Betty, David, and the other scholarship recipients who'd become like siblings to her. Later that evening, at the graduation party Robert had hosted at a local restaurant, Maya found herself in a quiet moment with her mentor and friend. They sat on the restaurant's patio watching the sunset and reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this point. "You know," Robert said, "when I first saw you in that diner, I thought I was helping you. But I think you helped me more than I helped you." Maya smiled. "How do you figure that?" "You reminded me why I became successful in the first place," Robert replied. "Not to accumulate wealth, but to have the power to make a difference in people's lives. You gave my success meaning." Maya looked out at the sunset, thinking about all the people who'd supported her along the way, and all the people she hoped to support in the future. "I think that's what real success is," she said. "Not what you accomplish, but what you make possible for others to accomplish." As the evening grew darker, Maya thought about Casey, the little girl in the hospital who was still fighting her own battles. Tomorrow, Maya would start her new job, and one of her first priorities would be finding ways to provide better support for foster children in the healthcare system. She thought about David, who was now developing software to help social workers track and support vulnerable children more effectively. She thought about the dozen other scholarship recipients who were pursuing degrees in education, social work, medicine, and business, all with the shared goal of making the world a little bit better for people who started life at a disadvantage. But mostly Maya thought about the future, and all the people she hadn't met yet who might need someone to believe in them. She thought about the conversations she'd have, the lives she'd touch, and the opportunities she'd create for others to discover their own potential. The scared 15-year-old who'd counted quarters in a diner booth was gone, replaced by a confident, young woman who understood that true wealth wasn't measured in dollars, but in the lives you touched and the dreams you helped make real. As Maya prepared to leave the restaurant, she pulled out her phone and sent a text to her fellow scholarship recipients. "Tomorrow we start changing the world. Who's ready?" The responses came back immediately, a chorus of voices ready to pay forward the gift they'd been given. Maya smiled as she read them, knowing that her story was just the beginning of something much larger. 4 words had changed her life. "Sir, I need help." But now she was ready to change other lives with 4 different words. "How can I help?" The circle was complete, but the story was just beginning.